Welcome to episode 4 of our first-time home buyer series. Alyssa Allen, top buyer specialist with the Home Marketing Group, is back with us for this episode to discuss the closing process. Okay, everything that we've done to this point has gotten us to we're getting to that closing date. So we're almost there, home stretch. But there's some things that need to happen beforehand to make sure we have a closing on the day that we want it to be. And there's a lot of things leading up to that are important that happen. You know, sometimes we let our foot off the gas after we get through the mortgage and the appraisal. And then we're like, all right, we're good. But there's some things that need to happen. So again, this is where communication and working with a good agent like Alyssa is so important. And at the Home Marketing Group, we have a closing coordinator as well who helps us make sure that all of our deadlines and all of our information is there and ready to go and making sure everybody has what they need, okay? Communicating with your attorney and title company, communicating with your lender, making sure that everybody's on the same page for that closing date, right?
Exactly.
So the first thing we need to make sure is we talk about closing dates, making sure we know what the closing date is. Now, when you do the contract, you should have established that already.
Right.
Are we still on track for that?
Exactly.
Confirming that closing date. Part of what Chris, who our closing coordinator, who is just in the background there, does is make sure that everybody is on the same page with a closing date, right? Alyssa, do you have anything to add on that?
Well, because it is a very common thing that, if anything prior to is delayed or anything of that nature, then we may need to move the closing date a day or two, which is not a big deal. We see it happen all the time, but we'll want to make sure that everything is in line and done so that we can close on that date or either do the proper documentation to get that date moved.
Right. So there are times where things need to move, but the faster we know about it ahead of time, proactively, not the day before, hopefully.
Yes.
The easier it is.
Everyone's on the same page.
Correct.
And it flows.
And there's some things that leading up to that, and we'll go into that in just a second. Right. So again, ensuring all parties have what they need to close is important. And again, a good closing coordinator and a good agent know what everybody needs. It's not just necessarily what you need, it's also what does the seller need too, because you can't move into a house that they're not necessarily ready to move out of yet. Right. So we need to make sure, and each state is different with when you can move in, and how the transfer and when actual possession takes place. In Tennessee here, takes place on the day of the closing. Right. So it's really, really important that we get everything lined up on both sides. Again, having good communication, understanding when everything is, and being proactive are hugely important here.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about movers. You know, sometimes this is a step that we, as agents, or some agents I've seen, don't necessarily put enough emphasis on, but talk about a little bit about scheduling movers.
Right. When things are happening within a tight timeline, you have to have things lined up. And especially right now, we've found you can't pick up the phone and call and just have someone right there at your disposal. So planning ahead, making sure you know when you have to be out, when you're ready to be in, and that, timelines are met are so important.
Yes. And just like lenders, shop the movers. Yes. Everybody, rates are different. They're different at different times.
Right.
They're different for different locations. And there's movers that sometimes will, if you're moving from another state, there's national movers, regional movers, and local movers too. Yes. So, make sure you're getting some quotes. Talk to your agent. We have some really great movers that we work with. Make sure you ask them, who do you recommend? There's usually that's a great place to start. Okay. So utilities, kind of along the same lines. Mm-hmm. Got to be proactive with utilities. You want to make sure the lights are on when you move in. Exactly. So, Alyssa, how do you guys usually handle that?
With my buyers, I make sure they have all of that information weeks in advance so that they can go ahead and make plans. A lot of times water, for instance, takes longer to get turned on than electricity to simply just be transferred. So we want to make sure that you have that information. You want to have all of that lined up and ready to go the day of closing. As soon as they will get it, you have possession of the property, you have the documentation that you can provide if need be to your electrical companies or whatnot, then you're ready to go and you can get it over in your name.
Right. So again, these are things that utility companies are used to. So you can call ahead of time and schedule the date that you want those utilities transferred to. Yes. And in a lot of cases, you're right. They just transfer, right to from the previous owner to you, the account information, and service doesn't get interrupted. Right. What you don't want to do is wait till the last minute, have them shut the service off, and then you have to pay a connection fee.
Right.
To turn them back on again.
Unnecessary fees, for sure.
Again, so several weeks in advance before, go ahead and schedule the utilities for the closing day. You could always call them ahead of time if the closing day changes and just let them know we're moving it. Right. But you can have all that ready to go. So on day one of closing, the utilities are transferred into your name.
Absolutely.
All right. So moving on to home warranties. A lot of different opinions about this. In a competitive market, it's a little bit harder to get a home warranty paid
Right.
for. But what we try to do when we negotiate a contract is have the seller pay for a home warranty
Right.
for the buyer.
Correct.
And that basically does what?
It really protects you, especially the first year of being in the home. If something breaks, say your refrigerator goes out or your air conditioning unit, things that maybe can't be found in a home inspection or aren't under, what they are looking for. It just is a protection for you because you never know what's going to happen. And that way you're not paying out of pocket 100% for those expenses.
Yeah. And then we're really big on this for first time home buyers specifically because in some cases that there's not a lot of money set aside for major repairs.
Right.
A heat and air unit goes out, it can be up to $5,000, $6,000, $7,000.
Right.
Home warranty will cover that to make sure that it's not coming out of your pocket aside from what their deductible is. Right. So
just like car insurance would be.
even if you end up having to pay for it, we highly recommend a home warranty for everybody.
Yes.
It ends up being anywhere from $400 to $600 or $700.
Yes, I think about $650 is what my average is.
Yeah, and so it's worth every penny.
Absolutely.
And again, if we can negotiate that to have the seller pay for it for that first year, then we highly recommend that we try to get that.
I've never had a buyer say, I wish I wouldn't have gotten that home warranty.
Yes.
Never
Okay.
happens.
Exactly. Homeowners insurance, the next thing. This is another thing like utilities and like movers that you have to make sure you've done ahead of time. You can get quotes from a home insurance company prior to closing.
Right.
They just need the address. So how do you usually handle that with your buyers?
Well, we do have a preferred insurance company that we work with that is happy to give quotes. You're welcome to work with whoever you want. If you have your auto insurance, you might get a discount for having your homeowner's insurance with them also. So we recommend that you check around. We're happy to give you all information that you need, but get your quotes, compare, and then make sure you have that coverage starting the day of closing.
Yeah. Right. So all these things can be handled up front. So, and most lenders and title companies were going to need that information before closing anyway. So it's great to be proactive weeks in advance.
Yes.
Going ahead and getting that insurance. And again, just like utilities, you can tell the insurance company what day you want that insurance effective by. But insurance companies and a good agent will know exactly how to handle this. Again, we recommend somebody local in case there's issues or changes, to be able to talk to somebody a lot easier than you normally would if you're calling like a 1-800 or a national company. Like
Exactly.
Okay. So now we've gotten through all that. We're prepared. We've got our utilities. We got our insurance. We got our warranty. We got our movers. We're ready to close.
Yes.
Okay. Talk about the final walkthrough. This is your last shot before you close to just ensure that the property is what?
That it is up to where it was when you saw it, when you were at your showing. So we want to make sure that everything is intact. We want to make sure that any repairs that we had requested are done. If that had came up during the negotiation process, it's not the time to ask for something new. This is just to make sure that everything is standard to where it should be for you to move in. Right.
And then if you do have repairs that were negotiated throughout the process, at that point you can verify that they were completed.
Exactly.
Right. And we do have certain scenarios sometimes where maybe we have to push the closing back to ensure those repairs are done properly, but it's your chance to review that and check it. So if a buyer comes to you and says, I don't really need a final walkthrough, what do you usually say to them?
I highly encourage the final walkthrough. It is your last chance to see the property before you sign on the dotted line. So, I've always say, please take your final walkthrough.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. Because once you verify the condition of the property and move to closing, it's very difficult at that point to get the seller to come back and do anything because you've basically gone through and said, I'm willing to accept the property.
As is.
Correct. As it sits and based on the contract. So that's a part that you need to do. And we recommend trying to do it 24 to 48 hours before closing to make sure that everything is tip top right before you close.
Yes.
Anything sooner is fine, but the closer it is, the shorter the gap, anything potential issues could happen in between.
Exactly.
Okay. Last thing, going to closing. This is something that sometimes title companies don't convey as well as they should, and it doesn't seem like a big deal, but it can slow things down, especially if you're closing at 5 o'clock on a Friday.
Right.
But what is it?
For your down payment and your closing costs, bring a cashier's check. They do not accept cash. They won't take a personal check. We need a cashier's check.
Right. Make sure you get that. And we recommend once you know what that amount is, going ahead and just having it.
Yes.
We've had scenarios where we've had people show up, didn't know,
Yes.
and we've had to delay closing because they couldn't get the cashier's check because it was late in the day and the banks were already closed.
Right.
So go ahead and take care of that ahead of time. Sometimes we recommend once you know, even if it's a few days in advance, go ahead and get it. That way you've got it and you can move forward with that.
And more people have online banks, and it's a little harder to get the cashier's check, so that planning ahead is imperative.
Yes, very much so. Okay. Thank you, Alyssa.
All right, thank you.
Guys, appreciate you being